Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's discussion on doing business in South Africa and how the nation is recovering from the coronavirus despite the recent spike in reported cases. My name is Noel Nefshir. I'm Director of International Business Services and Global Strategic Partnerships with Automation Alley based in Troy, Michigan. Created in 1999, Automation Alley is the Knowledge Center for Industry 4.0 for the state of Michigan. Today, we have more than 1,000 members representing multiple industries, primarily in advanced manufacturing. My roles and responsibility include helping companies do business overseas and by educating them on how to expand their markets to the rest of the world. Automation Alley is involved in helping foreign companies set up their operations in our region. And this includes providing them with complementary office space in our International Business Center while they're exploring investment opportunities in our region. Today, I'd like to discuss trade and investment opportunities in South Africa and as the world slowly emerges from the coronavirus. So with me today is my good friend and colleague, Richard Zerba, who heads up the state of Michigan's Foreign Office in Johannesburg, South Africa. Richard, always a pleasure to see you, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. I'd like to ask in the 10-15 minutes that we have, with my first question being, describe the trade services that you offer to Michigan and American companies doing business in South Africa, and for that matter, the entire African continent of 54 countries.
Right. So, like you said, Noel, we do cover almost all of Africa, the African Continental Free Trade Area, and we've actually got staff in 14 countries across Africa. So we've got a really broad bandwidth of really good people. Some of them are experts in their area, environmental sciences, agriculture, IT. We've got a couple of lawyers and working with us. So we've got a really good, high quality staff right across Africa. So the first thing is we do cover that entire free trade area of the AFTA market, and 1.3 billion people and 54 countries, as you mentioned, which is forming a common market right now. And so most of our services, Noel, are really, we do try to be quite flexible because every company requires something a little bit different. But the key product kind of services that we assist companies with are market research, whether that's a specialty part of an industry market or a market trend kind of a research in a certain sector. Then we also do potential partner searches, distributors, or finding potentially joint venture partners, importers, wholesalers, or if it's a company that sells to large industrial companies, then we might do an end user search. And then we help people link up with these potential buyers to find interest for their products. So when they're in touch with them, they're doing their sales pitches. It's a warm call, not a cold call.
All right. So you recently wrote a paper, and you optimistically pointed out that that Africa will be stronger as a result of the pandemic. That said, how is Africa recovering from the coronavirus, and how long will it take before we see a full recovery? I know that's a tough question because it's anybody's guess, right?
It's a tough question because Africa was the last in the gate with this.
Yeah.
And so Africa is likely going to be one of the last regions to come out of it in terms of each of the waves of the pandemic, however many waves that's going to be. But we locked down quickly. Most of the countries had international flights locking down very fast, where there may not have been any cases in their country. So we locked down when there was just a couple dozen cases in the country. Here in South Africa, for example, now we've got 200,000 cases, but most of those cases came in the last 2 weeks. So we're actually right at the beginning of the quick curve up. And in terms of where America is, where it's kind of flattened out, we've seen Africa's still got a long way to go. Most of the continent is under a very light or no lockdown kind of a situation. Governments don't have a lot of resources in a lot of cases to carry the ball for very far, so they're doing what they can with what they've got. But the issue is that you've got to keep people fed and you've got to keep them working. So that's the key thing. In South
Sure.
Africa, Namibia, Botswana, we've seen very tight lockdowns, as well Mauritius, which has successfully locked down and eliminated, I believe, all cases there, or maybe just down to a couple of cases. So they've had tighter lockdowns, but now they're forced to open up because the economy's requiring it. But again, Africa has a very low average age. The average age in Africa is 17. The average age in Africa is just under 20. In Nigeria, it's just over 17 years old. So some countries have very young populations where, relatively speaking, you're not going to see much of an effect. But overall, in the population of 1.3 billion, there's only 43 million people of retirement age of 65 and over. And that means that, relatively speaking, we don't have the kind of percussive requirement that's going to create the morbidity. We do have a lot of comorbidities in Africa, and so tuberculosis, HIV/AIDS, a lot of NCDs, that have crept in, like diabetes and hypertension. Those are also going to be affecting the total problem. But overall, the population of Africa is going to be very resilient to it. The other thing is that the African environment, having a lot of youthful entrepreneurs, is going to be looking for opportunities very fast, and they are right now.
Right.
In fact, when you look at the growth of the economies, a lot of it's been built on the youth culture, and so we've seen the youth culture shift into a very transformative business dynamic where they're looking at building a new economies based on new technologies and innovation. And so Africa is actually quite an exciting place to see this happening right now. But the other thing is that a lot of the economies, in fact, most of the economies are not oil exporters, they're oil importers. And so where they're importing energy, they've actually been benefiting from lower energy costs at this time. And so we're going to see Africa coming out of with those trends intact. But key to this is that even during this period, we've seen a big shift in how well China is liked and what the perceptions of Chinese businesses. This is a boon for American business to come in and compete on another footing. But keep in mind that there's more interest now in Africa than there was ever with almost everybody. Britain is coming in with their Brexit campaign of creating new markets for their exporters. Japan, Korea are coming in very strongly. America has Prosper Africa program, which is undoubtedly going to be developing and building those business spaces. So there's a lot going on with kind of a very much of a competitive space where Africa's in the middle and Africa's in the selling seats. They have a lot more competitors coming in and looking for the same sorts of things, and China's on the back foot right now. So that's how the environment's looking.
Well, just circling back to the paper that you wrote, you mentioned that Africa has sort of shifted their ideological mindset. They're less about the collective, more about the individual. So it's interesting, to hear that observation, because the economies have always been sort of tightly controlled. So hopefully the youth movement will change that, and it'll bubble up to the government leaders. So, so another question I have is, are there any specific challenges or circumstances unique to the South Africa or the entire continent as it emerges from the pandemic? I mean, in other words, each region has their own set of challenges that are specific to that country. Are there any that you could point out just with South Africa for starters?
Well, I would say that, interestingly enough, not being at the top of the technology tree has helped Africa in some ways. And so having a nested economy that isn't tied into just-in-time production has actually benefited a lot of companies, because they've had warehouses of inventory, they've had parts and so the supply chains in a lot of ways for local manufacture haven't been broken. We've never had a shortage really that I've perceived here in South Africa, but large-scale manufacturing such as automotive has been very hard hit because of the international significance of their logistics. But we've seen areas like agriculture and necessities and retail items continue to do well here at least on the manufacturing base. So this is one thing about Africa. We haven't been so tightly tied, and looking at all the articles now about deglobalization and all of these kinds of things, I think there are benefits. And so if you're looking at logistics and sourcing and these kinds of things, Africa, although the model hasn't been a model of the developed countries, in some ways it's a very different model, and we're going to come out of this again relatively stronger because we haven't had all the pieces torn to shreds like we've seen in some of the more developed economies.
So you kind of anticipated my next questions. What are some of the lessons learned from the coronavirus, and how's it changed South Africa? Especially in terms of accelerating the adoption of technologies related to, well, pick it, education, healthcare, IT, information communication technologies, and including the video conferencing tools that you and I are using right now. Because I really didn't start video conferencing until this crisis hit, and now it's a big part of what I do every day.
Yeah, let me tell you that my staff and I are already experts well before this, because we've got a continent that is over 3 times the size of America. And so we've been covering video conferencing and doing all this for a couple of years now, easily. In fact, we've been doing video conferencing for 20 years. But the thing is, what we've seen that's very exciting right across Africa is demand for educational IT, educational management systems, online services. Africa's just like the rest of the world, and companies that have come in from Michigan particularly, and from other places that we do work with, we've seen a tremendous interest in distance diagnostic health programs. We've seen high interest in online education. We've seen a high interest in services for education management systems, because if you think about it, all of the stuff that's going on with the IT industry, but pulling together what's happening with the schooling industry, where kids aren't really in school, but they're doing school online. We're seeing high interest from governments. We're seeing good interest from business. So there's some particular areas, particularly where innovation meets the requirements that we've got right now, and there's people and companies with money still to be purchasing.
Well, ponder the irony. We're supposedly the most innovative, or certainly one of the most innovative countries in the world, but yet we have legacy systems with vested interests in the status quo. So video conferencing is something that's sort of new to us, whereas in Africa and in particular in China, they sort of leapfrogged us in the area of IT, like cell phone use is always been much more prevalent in the U.S. before the U.S. started catching on. And also, you mentioned South Africa. You've been using video conferencing for the last 20 years. So
yes, but we've been doing it with American technology, Noel.
Yeah, I know.
So
if only we were as quick as you to adopt it for ourselves. But anyway.
Yeah, and that's the thing. America is the great innovator, but in fact, because of the legacy systems which have done very well at diminishing their costs and bringing a good price to the markets, there hasn't been a need for that. But Africa, not having the infrastructure, is very keen to participate in new technologies. In fact, there's a lot of different ways, particularly electronic banking, where Africa is
that's right,
ahead of America. And the other thing is that people are willing to try. We have a young population here. Young people are willing to try and learn something a lot faster than people who've done something for 20 years. I mean, I haven't
Exactly.
seen a paper check. I haven't seen a paper check in years and years and years
Oh,
now.
right, right, exactly.
Things,
Interesting.
I mean, but you can live a lifestyle like that in the USA, of course. But you know, here we've jumped across requirements, and so where logistics is concerned, Africa's been very quick in drone acceptance. For example, where roads don't exist, we've been very
Sure,
quick on leapfrogging not into cheaper technology, but into really the best technology for digital communications,
sure.
where previous landlines have become defunct. We haven't had, across Africa, a lot of the landlines haven't been functioning very nicely. And it's just the same thing, you know, it can be a blessing in disguise that you didn't have all those legacy networks. And now,
Sure.
but the good technology is coming in very inexpensively now.
Yeah,
And that
very
is making
important.
everything affordable. And the key thing is that when you've got good technology and you've got a population that is experimental and wanting to use that technology and sees a business application for it where they can earn money for themselves and their families and their companies,
Mhm.
they're going to take use of it. And it's going to, so we're looking at an exciting time
Sure,
here in Africa. The more uh, that the faster the world is moving, the faster these young people are becoming integrated. And I'll tell you just one anecdotal thought is that we're seeing a lot of young people right across Africa starting to speak with close to American accents right now.
no kidding.
This
I'll be darned.
this is
Wow,
a big change in the English speaking African countries.
that sure is.
Um,
Yeah,
and I've noticed it. And so it's not just Disney Channel, not just Nickelodeon, but it's what they're picking up from online, how they're seeing that, and it also tells you an affiliation about what they want to aspire to.
sure,
And
sure.
so we do see a lot of obviously you can conduct business in English across most of the continent, which is interesting to a lot of Americans. But yes, English is the
Yeah,
language in about 60% of the population's the national language in 60% of the country, the continent's population.
yeah.
Um,
It's
but
interesting
you know,
though that how they are adopting the American accent, because when I hear the British accent, I automatically add 20 points to that person's IQ. But
that's
that
right.
said, though, interesting observation. So, what are South Africa's immediate needs that U.S. companies can maybe fulfill? I mean, is it in the industries we talked about, like advanced manufacturing, education, healthcare, IT? Where do you see the opportunities for American companies, not just in in reaction to this pandemic, but also once the pandemic is nothing but a memory?
Hmm. Well, the key thing is where technology meets necessity. And so Africa is very keen on agricultural technology. They're keen on educational technology.
Yeah.
They're keen on healthcare technology. All of these things where it makes a growing middle class um, better off, where if you put yourself in the place of a young family, where are you going to go with that technology? You know, you want a better lifestyle. And so, um, you know, people that are looking to benefit themselves have a variated diet. They want better food processing, for example.
Mhm.
So having those applications in line, and again going further down the value chain in that agricultural production, good ag tech.
Mhm.
And Africans are looking for first-class agricultural technology right across the board.
Sure,
Africa's 60% of the available arable land in the world right now, and it's going to be needed as the world population grows. The other things are healthcare, of course, we mentioned education, we mentioned, but Africa is diversifying a lot of its economies. There's a lot of new companies coming up and doing manufacturing and assembly. We're seeing automotive assembly coming back into West Africa. after many years of a hiatus. And so, you know, and by the way, some of these programs were pulled back just as COVID came in because the investment wasn't there again and all of these sorts of things. But the interest is there, the market is there locally. And so eventually these things are going to be coming back. But again, to be competitive, you've got to have an angle on the technology that's going to make things better, going to automate where possible, but to keep it simple for a labor force that is growing and very young. You know, the other thing is we've got to keep in mind that within another 20 or 30 years, Africa is going to have at least half of the world's living labor force.
Jeez.
And so this is a really important
For sure.
development. And you know, if you wonder about the next stage of the world economy, we're going to see a lot of young Africans going global with their ideas, a lot of young Africans competing globally, or not just competing, but working complementarily with companies from the United States, and really being a keen value addition to what's going on in the world right now. We can't look at the world economy as a set of countries. It is a set of alliances amongst people you know. That is what real business is all about. And once you start seeing the value that young people can have, and you realize that, wait a minute, these people are focused, they work very hard, they're educated, and they don't play video games 80 hours a week, you know. There's a big difference right now between the culture. There's a big cultural gap, and young people in Africa are much more like, in some ways, people who grew up in the 1930s and 40s in America. They're very hardworking, very tied to family values. They're entrepreneurial. They don't. They're somewhat status oriented, but not as status oriented as most people in Europe or North America. So, you know, overall, they've got the values, and this is what's actually going to help bring things together. But where those young people get the technology and the ideas, the capital will be drawn to them, because the big companies, the big tech companies, are already paying attention to this, and they're putting big investments across Africa. So these are some interesting developments that we're seeing here, and so we're looking forward to a long run for Africa. I don't look at all the trends. Looking at history is sometimes a predictor, but trends always change. And I think as we see Africa becoming increasingly more middle class, we're going to see that some of the birth rates come down, of course, like we've seen in other countries. But yeah, so we're looking at a lot of different things that.
Sure, I know when we first met, we were talking about the uncanny similarities between South Africa and Michigan in terms of their industries. So, you know, automotive, we talked about healthcare, IT, information communication technologies. Right. You just pointed out another one, though, agriculture and food processing, because, you know, when people think about Michigan worldwide, they only think about automotive production, but agriculture is our second biggest industry. So
companies that specialize in crop applications for, you know, deciduous plums and apples and all of that. Right. South Africa needs that kind of technology. Right. And Michigan's got it. Michigan's got, you know, it's all about just looking where your markets are, where you're selling to. And I know that
anything that we can do to increase crop yields in Africa makes the whole world that much better. So, as you know, Automation Alley is organizing a trade mission to South Africa this October. So beyond due diligence, what's the best advice that you can give to a Michigan company or American company that's exploring South Africa as a market to do business in for the first time?
Well, video conferencing is what everybody's up to right now. And I would also like to say that Africans love to do business based on a relationship.
Of course.
So here's an idea that maybe you haven't heard before, but when you go on a trade mission, maybe you need to think about, if I was to actually go and visit a country, what would I want to get out of it? And so we look at a virtual trade mission as trying to get as close as possible to that visit without actually having to visit. But one idea that I would have is that if you're getting close to actually thinking about a potential counterpart company doing business with you, you may want to suggest to them, why don't we just sit down and have a cup of coffee, you in your office there in Michigan and me in my office here in South Africa. Why don't we just sit down and get to know each other a bit? Mm-hmm. Ask a few questions, and in American business, it's not done. But in South African business, it's the way to do business. So, you know, maybe you could suggest that you have 2 video conference calls, and maybe you don't want to categorize them as one and such, but you do want to make your calls personable. You want to get to know the person. You want to feel at ease. You want to let them feel at ease. You can talk about business, but once you start opening up about your life and the things you enjoy, maybe you've traveled a few places, maybe you can find something in common, maybe,
sure.
You know, and these are the kind of things that build a healthy business relationship here across Africa. I would say South Africa's pretty much in a transactional mode like the US, but other parts of Africa are very relationship based, and you must have those key contacts almost as a friend as you go. And people don't want to do business on a transactional basis. They want to do it on a generational basis in Africa. So you've got to understand that they're looking to find out things about you to make them a lifetime business partner. It's not just about flipping one deal. It's about creating something that's going to last a lifetime. And I'll tell you that young people here are very different than their parents' generation. So you're going to have 2 different types of companies, one that's kind of run by older people and one that's run by younger people. You'll be able to tell right away, but both of them value that, both of those kind of age cohorts value that personal connection.
You know, so, they often say that cross-cultural communication skills or interpersonal skills are soft skills. In my view, they're a hard skill, because that's what gets you in the door. And you're right, absolutely. I think Americans have gotten better about relationship building. They do understand the importance of it. So that said, hey, this has been an extremely enlightening discussion. Richard, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today. And we're looking forward to your help, your assistance with our upcoming trade mission in South Africa. And wish you well. Have a great summer, even though it's winter in South Africa. But again, thank you for being with us today.
Well, like I say, down here, our summers are no worse than winter or actually summer.
Exactly.
Our winters, let me turn that around. Our winters are no worse than summer in northern Michigan. And we've got an excellent team, you know, that is right across Africa. I believe we've got one of the best in the world. And so we're looking forward to our Michigan visitors coming virtually or maybe in person after all this, the winds of this pandemic blow over. So thank you very much, Noel, for your.
All right. Thank you again. Always a pleasure, Richard. Take care.